Hello. Oh, that's kind of loud, but that's okay. Sorry about this. Apparently, my computer is not talking to this projector, and then after like 15 minutes of going through all the settings, nothing worked. So I'm using somebody else's computer. So if something weird happens in my slides, that wasn't me. It was just the gremlins in the machine. But that's how life as a presenter is. I also had to handwrite my name tag. So if you want to scan my QR code later on, I hand wrote Dode. I hope there's nothing rude coming out of that. First of all, before you get very excited about this and want to scribble everything down, relax. I've collected everything you need about this at aka.ms mobile era, where you can download the slides and you can also get all the links and all the resources that I'm going to talk about. I'm Chris Heilmann. If you want to have pictures of hedgehogs and kittens and puppies and lots of pictures of my dog, you can follow me on Twitter at CodePoet. And I work for a little startup in Redmond that just started 40 years ago doing these computer things. And I've been a web developer for about 20 years now, and I've been very excited about seeing smartphones come around. I've been very excited about seeing the app revolution come around. I was kind of disappointed how apps became a consumable product in software again. I gave a TED talk about this where I was just like, why do we actually have to download 50 meg for a change when we could just go to our website? And I'm still kind of confused how many people shift me to a website and then say like, please download our app, while I already downloaded their 50 JavaScript libraries and 400k hero image and these kind of things. Yesterday I came in by the train here from the airport and says like, download our app to buy a ticket next time. And I'm like, I'm in Oslo maybe twice a year. Why would I want to have 30 to 50 meg of app on my phone that keeps updating for buying a ticket that you use twice a year? This makes no sense. We need more on demand and more try before you buy and more like throwaway kind of software. But the problem is that we all think that our products and our apps are the most important things and we have to retain people. We measure by how long people have used our applications rather than like did our application help people do the things that they came for. It's very easy to retain people in your app. Just make it as hard as possible to use them. Then they stay for hours and hours and you have great numbers of retention. You also have only disgruntled users, but who cares, right? So progressive web apps are all the rage. You probably have heard about them. Google has done even a whole like tour of them, and after they've been announced a few years ago, it's every conference has at least one keynote or two workshops or three other talks about progressive web apps, and everybody's jumping on that new idea bandwagon, much like we jumped on DHTML and Ajax and all the things. Every 3 years there's something new that is happening in web technology that is the end of every native technology and is the future of the web. And that's great because that's what the web is about. It's an open distributed platform with open standard technologies, so we can be as creative as we want to be with those. Now, when we started talking about PWAs, this is what we said a PWA has to be. It has to be progressive, responsive, network independent, app-like, fresh, safe, discoverable, re-engageable, installable, and linkable. And I've given other talks where I went through all the things that are there, and then I realized, you know what, this is actually expecting far too much from people. You cannot think about all these things. We always give these talks where we talk about people about the perfect application, and then people happen and time frames happen and budget happens, and out of a sudden the thing that we plan to try to be perfect is the thing that we're never allowed to do and never actually shift out there in the world, and people don't use them. And if you use any app, how many of those do you actually use on your machine that do all these things even in a native environment? A lot of times like the 80% getting there and the 20% you get time later to fix that. You know that lie that we give developers all the time? Like, I know it's broken now, but you're gonna fix that later. This is never gonna happen. This is never gonna be a thing. Just basically just give up trying to understand this. The other thing that when it comes to progressive web apps, especially when you're a native developer, is whenever we do something with the web, we start fighting internally in the web world about like, okay, this doesn't only have to be an app, right? This could be, I can turn my blog into a PWA. I can turn my book into a PWA, and that's totally true. Not all things using PWA technology need to be apps. And that's totally okay. My colleague Aaron Gustafson has written a great article, or list apart a few days ago, that said, yes, that web project should be a PWA, saying how turning a book into an app-like experience makes sense, how turning a shopping site into an app-like experience makes sense. So all of these technologies can be applied everywhere. But I'm as a fan of the web, I'm getting kind of tired of that messaging. We always say like, here is something, and you can do whatever you want with it. Whereas other companies say like, here's our SDK and we're better than you, so use this. And you want to do something else, tough luck. Wait for 2 years, spend another $900 on the next phone, then you have that functionality. So we're always too nice to ourselves and too open. So today, I just basically want to talk about what progressive web apps are not and what they can be for us. So first of all, as we're in the middle of the hype cycle and everybody wants to sell you something about progressive web apps, they're not a tick box in your development flow. You cannot say like turn this into a PWA, although it doesn't do any of the things that a PWA is supposed to do. But there's a lot of like PWA generators, and ironically, I'm working on a PWA generator, and I'm going to talk about it later. But don't just think like just because you say like this makes it into a PWA. It's an approach, it's an idea, it's a rethinking of what apps should be. It's also not the end of all native development. Native development is necessary, makes a lot of sense. You will have a lot of talks at this conference about great things that are only possible in native and only possible in one platform. And as somebody of the web, I'm always like, oh, it's only on one platform. And I'm like, you know what? If that's the platform you want to target and that's the world you live in, great. Do something cool for your end users. Make something great out of it. I hate these bickering between web and native all the time. What every web content needs to get converted to is another thing. Everything has to be a progressive web app now. Your blog doesn't have a service worker. You're like outdated. You're not doing anything. The same way you have to shift everything from Java to PHP to Node to Thing every few years. I've blogged since 2004. I'm still using WordPress, basically the most attacked piece of software on this planet, and probably so hacked in my case that I cannot maintain it properly anymore. But every single time I think about changing my blogging platform, I write an article instead, because that's what blogging is about. And nobody cares what your blog is running on as long as you write something good and people care about reading it. Native apps ported to the web is not what progressive apps are either. We've done that and failed. I worked on Firefox OS, I worked with WebOS, I worked with HTAs in Windows 98 and all these different platforms. We always tried to make the native thing work on the web, and look, it looks the same and performs half as fast. And we wondered why people didn't want it. There's benefits to both the web and to native, and instead of just one copying the other, we should merge them together and do something cool with that. And this is what PWAs are about. It's a development approach of using a set of technologies that allows web content to be app-like experiences, including offline functionality, notifications, and device access. And this is what everything is about in apps. I'm offline all the time. I have to pay for roaming. I don't have a SIM card that connects. If your app does not work offline, you don't have an app. You have something that pisses me off, not an app. That makes no sense to me. If I have to go back to your app to see if something happens rather than getting a notification, it's not an app to me. If I cannot access the camera or the great things my phone gives me from your app, why is it running on that device? Give me access to the things that makes it useful. And if you use notifications, that's the next big thing right now. You already might have seen that websites, you go to them right now and say like, do you want notifications from this website? Because now we have notifications on the web. That's a new kind of pop-up. That's like sign up for this newsletter before you read my article. Buy me dinner first, okay? Like, don't ask me immediately to subscribe to you to the end of the world and allow me to interrupt my life. I just want to see if that article actually makes sense before I actually care about subscribing to it. So a notification that just tells me I have to go back to the app, that's just annoying. A notification should be something that's interactive and allows me to do a simple task. Say yes, no, don't care right now. Or yes, put into archive, put into my to-do list, these kind of things. Notifications are micro interactions. They're not just like messages to bring people back to your app so you can actually control them and do things inside your app any longer. Progressive web apps are progressive. That means the experience of the application changes with the capability of the device. If I use it on an old Android, fine, it should work. If I use it on a cool iPhone and with the great camera and front camera, face recognition, payment, fingerprint API, these things should work there. But it should not say your app is not capable of fingerprinting, you cannot use this. Your phone is not capable of fingerprinting, you cannot use this. It should give me the main experience first and then get better depending on what I'm using the application in. And this is where the web excels. This is where web technology is much better than any of the others because there's no compilation step, there's no conversion step. It runs on demand and it runs in time. It gets compiled while I'm using it, and you can put an if statement in JavaScript to give you another button when the thing is available, and if not, the button shouldn't show up because a button that doesn't do anything is a terrible thing. Progressive web apps are an opportunity to take these technologies and clean up and speed up our current web-based project. People are not using the web because it's bloated and slow and friggin' annoying. When I go to an article and I get like 500 ads around that and I download 50 meg of ad trackers and all kind of things just to read 10 lines of text, then we failed our end users. The web is supposed to be consumed independent of device, independent of connectivity, independent of speed, independent of ability. And now we actually have all these things that gives me 5 pop-ups before I actually read something. And that's why people go and use things like AMP, that's why people use things like instant articles, or that's why people think an app makes more sense, because the experience is better. All the tech involved in progressive web apps are open standards that can be used in a pick and mix format. You don't need to use all of them. You don't need to understand all of them. But 2 of them are super important, and I'm going to talk to them about them in a second. For me, they're an opportunity to reconsider what we call apps as well, and how users find, use, and discard them. As what we're doing right now doesn't work. If you look at the numbers of retention of apps and how many people never ever use an app after downloading it the first time, or how many apps lose all their users in the first 3 months, we're doing something wrong. I don't want to give you my credit card details for a free app. Why should that be a barrier? If I don't have a credit card, I cannot use your application. I might not even get interested in it because I'm blocked out from the very beginning. I don't want to download 50 meg over a slow, flaky connection and then use the thing and then realize it's not for me. I want to try it out, and if I like it, it gets better. This is what I want from technology. This is 2017. This should be not too much to ask. But right now, we're asking people to download things, and every time I go back home and connect to wireless, 50 apps on my phone want to update that I haven't used in month and month and month. Why is this? Why do apps not vanish? I think the icon should rust and fall apart a bit when you don't use them, or just get like a frowny face, and when you don't, like Tamagotchi, but they died when you didn't feed them. And it should be the same with apps. Because there are like Tamagotchi. Every app on my phone tells me like, please come back to me, please come back to me. Your friends are talking about you. What are they saying? Yeah, well, gotta open the app for that, right? For the purpose of this keynote, I want to talk only about apps. I don't want to talk about web books, or I don't want websites turning into PWAs, but apps. And the main definition of apps for me is interfaces to do things with. An app to me is not something to read. An app to me is something where the interaction and the consumption is in equal parts, if not more. I use an app to do something. I use an app not to find out what the weather is. That's a news feed to me. I use an app to say like, I'm actually going this week to that one. How much temperature differences between those 2 locations? No weather app does that. I wrote one years ago for myself, which is just an HTML page. But things to do things with. And this is where the web was absolutely horrible. This is the travel booking site of some company where I book things, so I don't know who they are. That's why I covered the logos and stuff. But this is not fun. This is giving me like flashbacks to 1997 when in Internet Explorer 6 I had to do rounded corners by splitting images and positioning them into a table and these kind of things. This is every single time I click on something, it loads something in the background without telling me that it's loading something. And while I'm typing into the next field, out of a sudden the whole interface changes. This is where on my Surface Book with a 3000 by 2000 resolution, these radio buttons are basically like I gotta zoom into that one really, really good to actually hit them. Or I chose something else, it loads something in the background again. So it's like trying to find the interface and trying to do things. First of all, what we did was information overload. I don't need all these friggin' options. I need one form telling me, do you want to book a flight? Okay, where are you going from? Where are you going to? When are you going? What class do you need? What flight do you need? Step by step, wonderful things. Instead, we gave people the whole interface and hoped that they found the right things in them. Basically, it shouldn't be a game of finding the information. Half of these things are not clickable. It's a UI for a big screen with low resolution. So this one was built when 1024 was still a great thing to do. And then it probably made sense. But on a larger scale, it didn't work. And this is something that fascinates me. The web has always changed. Form factors come around every few weeks. There's no fixed form factor. Remember when we all decided like, oh, the iPhone 2 had that resolution? We all should build interfaces only for that resolution. The new iPhone 1 icon has a higher resolution than the full resolution of the iPhone 1. There is nothing you can predict what the future will be. Make your interfaces as flexible as possible. It's a fat connection dependency. When this thing doesn't load, it gives me a spinner and it has 5 different icons for loading things. So this is also fun as well. You never know what loads where, but there's different animations and all of them are really choppy, so it's not fun to look at. And there's no offline experience. I cannot do anything offline with that thing at all. And there's hardly usable on mobile. On mobile, basically this form is impossible because they didn't even use a max device width meta tag to make sure it shrinks to the right size. You always have to zoom it out and shift around. And by that time, you selected it and load things in the background already. The next step we did on the web is we made it look better. We put different fonts in there, nicer blues, like bigger, sometimes bigger text, or maybe some more white space around it. This is an expense system, again by a certain company, and what the hell are those things? And why is this there? And what's going on there? You know, again, we have the same problem. We give people far too many options. All I want to do is like, I have an expense right now. I want to put that in to use it later on. But there is no option to do that. And this is even better because before that we had to upload an Excel sheet. Options on the screen are not choices, they are decisions. You force your users to make subconscious decisions all the time by showing them too many things at the same time. It's a non-adaptive UI. This one, if I use it on my mobile phone, doesn't do anything either. There's no offline functionality, there's no access to useful hardware options. What do I want to do with an expense system? I want to take pictures of receipts. There's not a single way to access my camera in this application. There's no way that I can just hold up the receipt, it scans it OCR scans it, tells me like, hey, okay, that's obviously a taxi company, here's already the things I'm doing for you. These are all possible to do, but we built these things because the framework, or in this case .NET 2.0 or whatever, came out with it, with this kind of interface. This is what people want. And security is by jumping through lots and lots of hoops. This thing only works with a VPN and only works in a certain browser and only after a certain login to another system, and when it's full moon and my height is above 150 or whatever like that. Whereas like with mobile devices, we're already authenticated. This is a big benefit that mobile apps had. This is the new one that we're using right now, and this is freaking cool. Here is my expenses. I click on them, I put them together in an expense report, I select the manager who's most likely to not be pissed off by them, and I'm happy. And if I click on any of them, it says like, hey, do you want the receipt? Hold it in front of the camera and take that picture and upload it that way. Don't go to your file folder, try to find it in the right folder of your computer, upload these 8 meg JPEG that then only needs to be 100K because nobody looks at these things anyways until something very much goes wrong. Show me what I have and where it should go. These are the things that came through your credit card. Where are the receipts for that? That's all that is necessary in that first step of this expense app. Allow me to quickly get an overview. Okay, this is the stuff that happened in the last few weeks. Don't expect an interaction model. Don't expect this to use a mouse and a keyboard. This is a touch interface, this is a pencil interface, this is a mouse interface, this is a keyboard interface. I can use whatever to actually access that. I can use a voice control to get the two different things as well. And allow me to use what my device offers. In this case, take a photo, with your with your Surface Book or with your MacBook or whatever, rather than like, please take a photo, upload it somewhere, and then upload it here. Now, mobile apps answered a lot of these UI problems. Mobile apps were a great step forward until they don't do something useful. This is now what we moved the travel app to. So this was my flight yesterday coming in here. Now, if you think this plus button down there allows me to book a new flight, you're sorely mistaken. All it says, like, if something is not available in this trip plan, you can write it in by hand. So this big button, that means to me is the main interaction of this application, is a to-do list app inside that application. That makes no sense whatsoever. But I had to download this after downloading the the corporate portal on my Android, after encrypting my Android, after putting a virus scanner on my Android before I wasn't allowed to use this application. And then on the last step, after installing all these other things, it told me you have to turn on install things outside the Play Store. Then you can actually do that, basically allowing my Android to download any kind of malware in the background. But this one is safe. This is not what we should be having in 2017. Make the pain of store access and installation worth my while. If I have to go to a store, download the app, go through the update process every time it's there, this app should be the most interactive thing and allowing me to do what I want to do, in this case, book a friggin' flight. Let me use my device to its abilities. Again, this is like, get my camera in there, interact with my notifications, interact with all the great things I have on my phone, interact with Uber, interact with other taxi services that I have out there, make these apps talk with each other. Let me do what I came for, use notifications that allow me to do things. Again, don't tell me like, there's something in your app, please come, please. And work offline and don't expect massive data downloads on non-Wi-Fi. And this is another thing, it works offline to a degree, but some of the pages are not there available to me. So let's put these together. This is an expense manager app that I'm using as well. This is what it looks like on a mobile phone, and it uses the screen in the way it does. It allows me to go into kind of things, and when I press a plus, I can enter a new expense. I can select a receipt which came from my camera, I can save it, and I can do these things with it. This is the same application on a desktop, and it works the same way, but it gives me more information because there's more screen space available. It gives me the same functionality and it gives me the same overview, and it's not as crowded as other applications might be, but it works on the desktop in this fashion and on the mobile phone in this fashion. Now, with native environments or like these kind of things, we always had to build two apps for that. This is a PWA. This is a website. All I need to do is to go to this URL and the thing is on my device. It downloaded in the background while I'm using it, and the more I use it, the more functionality I get, the easier it becomes for me to use these things. And this is what PWAs put together. If we look at the positives of the web and native, positive of the web is the link is the distribution model. There's nothing better than that. Trying to get something not to be distributed over the web is really, really hard. Everything that goes on the web, as soon as that gets shared by people, gets cached by search engines, gets cached by end user machines, it's great. Simple atomic updates. If I need to change the logo, I change that logo file. I don't need to recompile the whole app, put it in an app store and do something there. Flexible layout options, grids, flexbox, media queries, VW, VH, and CSS. All of these things are supported across browsers that we have these days. All of these things allow you to build interfaces that don't make any assumptions about what the end user has, but make themselves readable depending on what's available. Small data footprint, loading on demand and environment. So instead of loading the 50 meg up front and keeping it in memory, and let's not forget that memory is not an iPhone 9 or iPhone 6 or 7. There's a lot of phones out there with 128 meg of RAM and that's all you get. And you cannot download more RAM. So you got to make sure that the first data footprint of your app is as little as possible and it loads as fast as possible. Reusability of code, conversion to other form factors. When I start with HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, I can convert it to other formats. If I start with a binary format, I cannot convert it to the others. I can use React Native, there's talks about that later. We're getting into that same space in native as well. Native, on the other hand, what's great about it is that offline capabilities by design. It has full access to the hardware. It has authenticated, verified device access. It has high trust distribution model. As much as I don't like stores, people like stores. They trust stores because that's where viruses are harder to come from. Whereas like randomly downloading it from a website, different issue. Payments are easy on native and people expect to pay for things online. They don't expect for things to pay on the web because we had a whole generation of people that have been told everything on the web is free. And bleeding edge technology as a competitive advantage is a thing that native is very much about. Every time a new iOS version comes out, it does things that Android doesn't do. Every time a new Android version comes out, it does things that iOS doesn't do. Every time a Windows phone comes out, no, let's not forget about it. Now the negatives. Verification and authentication on the web is hard because I don't own the hardware. I don't know what hardware is being used. The hardware changes all the time rather than installing something on it. We've got patchy access to hardware. Not every browser, not every environment allows me to access a camera, to access storage, these kind of things. Huge fragmentation of devices and displays. The web was defined as independent of device. So you cannot say I only want users on iOS on my web page. Patchy trust and capabilities. People have been trained by these horrible interfaces I showed you earlier that the web is shit. That the web doesn't give you the functionalities that a native application gives you. So whenever I show a website that does cool things, people don't trust it. Payments are not easy or even expected. A lot of people want everything for free. Same on Android. On iOS, you can put something for $3.99 in the store and people buy it. On Android, you put something in for $3.99, they go for the 99-cent option with like shitloads of ads in them instead. They're cheapskates. Most of the time they can't afford it. The great thing about targeting iOS is people have money or have more money than Android people have. And because it's partly a religion. It's when I worked with the Met Police in London, they basically told me that stealing an iPhone is about 80 times better than stealing an Android phone because having an iPhone means you're part of a different social class than having an Android phone. And that's just sad if we define ourselves by our devices. Now, what's negative about native? Huge data footprint with non-atomic updates. Every time a change, download the whole thing again. It's getting better. There's a talk this afternoon about instant apps on Android, so that's something that I will go to and want to know more about because we've been teased about this for years now. Let's hope we're having something. Slow update cycles because of negotiation overhead. You got to build the thing, you got to submit it to the marketplace, you got to hope that Apple says yes to it, and then it comes out there. A hotfix in an application is almost impossible in a native environment. On the web, it's very much possible because you just change these two files that are malicious or have a problem. High expectations and breakneck competition. It's a price race to the bottom. Trying to find something in these marketplaces is sometimes really, really painful. And people just go for the cheapest thing and wonder why they're actually then spending lots and lots of money in-app payments because somebody has to be paid. And it's bespoke development for each platform with only minor reuse. So you have to have an Android department, you have an iOS department. You have to have different engineers for all these kind of jobs. Or you outsource them, or you use something like React Native or to any other startup platform. So how do PWAs bridge these differences? How do we make these two things together? The first change we did with PWAs, rather than having other apps on the web, is that it needs to be a secure origin. So it needs to be HTTPS or HTTP2. So a PWA, as soon as you have that, we can grant you more access to the device. We can give you more storage, we can let you access a location, we can let you access a camera. But because HTTP, if you don't encrypt your things, basically it's a man-in-the-middle attack waiting to happen. There's no way we can allow a random JavaScript from the web, from an HTTP endpoint to access your address book, because that would just mean somebody else listens in and takes all these stuff there. So you need to start with a secure endpoint. It then needs to have a manifest. And the manifest basically tells me this is an app, this needs to have this and kind of access and that kind of access. And that is a big difference to what we did before, where we had a different manifest for every different format, for WebOS, for Firefox OS, for Android, for pin to screen on iOS. This is a standardized, very, very simple JSON format, and this is what it looks like. You have a name, a short name, icons, a start URL, which needs to be a canonical URL, then display, orientation, background color, theme color, and then you have icons and all kind of other stuff in there as well. Now, the great thing about having this, rather than just having a meta element in your HTML that says this is an app, is that it can get indexed like any other resource on the web. So the first thing that PWAs allow you to do is that app manifests can be indexed by search engines and by ingested into markets that way. We do that in Bing. Bing is a search engine. If you don't know that, you can Google for it. And Google does that now with the Android store soon as well. So this one, for example, is on the Windows Store is the Channel 9 app. And in a search result in Bing, it looks like this. It says like, this is an application, here are the ratings, here's how much it costs, this is what it does, click here to try it out. And if you go through it, then you have it listed in the marketplace like that. This is all populated by the manifest file. All the Channel 9 people had to do is upload a manifest file to their server, and that's it. Now the name, the description, the icons and the screenshots are already populated in that listing from that one resource, rather than your listing being something completely different to your application and getting out of sync when your icons change and so on and so forth. Another big part of the PWA stack is a service worker. Now, service workers are basically kind of proxy servers that are in between web apps, the browser and the network. And these are written in a JavaScript. So imagine you have full control over every request that goes from your web app to the network in a JavaScript environment. So you can name caches, you can purge caches, you can say what gets stored where, you can intercept loading of certain resources and then give them other resources. For example, if the browser supports WebP, a request to a JPEG should be actually getting a smaller image because that browser supports it. You can do that in Service Worker. And you define the rules what should be cached and loaded from where, and there's no more hoping that the browser caches things for your work. And also there's no involuntary caching where things you didn't want to get cached got cached by the browser. You define where something goes, what it's named, when it should be delivered from where. Should it come from the network first? Should it come from the cache first? These kind of things. You intercept network requests and define what happens, and you serve from cache, refresh, convert before display, and so on and so forth. And it also refreshes your whole app in the background. You can pull new content and notify the user with push notifications that something new is available. So Service Worker is what enabled push notifications for the web, something that only native had for years and years, where I can prompt the user to say like, here's new functionality, next time you open it, it's actually there for you, please refresh your app, rather than like hoping that people reload it. When we had only app cache before that, which was the first offline functionality kind of toolkit in HTML5, that one just was a one-off. We didn't have any control over it. With Service Worker, I got granular control over everything that happens to my app. Now, if you want to learn about these things, tools and resources are lots and lots of them out there. There's the Service Worker Cookbook from Mozilla. Mozilla, that's actually editable as well. It's a wiki where it has different recipes of like, if you want to do this, here's the Service Worker to write. If you want to do this, here's the Service Worker with the problems that might happen if you do this wrong, and so on and so forth. So there's all these like green, amber, and red things, like here's also how supported it is across different browsers and different platforms. It's a very nice resource to get started to play with service workers. Google has a JavaScript library called Google Workbox. That one is a library that allows you to write service workers without going into the nitty-gritty of the service worker spec itself, or understanding all the method and objects that are in service workers. So what it says is like, give me network first, give me cache first, and these kind of settings, these kind of abstraction settings. It's a very simple way to add a service worker to your app without having to understand everything that goes on in the service worker spec, because there's movement in there as well. Some things change, so the abstraction library would reflect that when it changes. I'm working on the PWA builder. This one allows you to give it a URL to your application. So you give it a URL, and then it finds the manifest file, it finds what the app is about, and it starts indexing it for you. It takes the fav icon, and it allows you to generate the things that you need. You can create a web manifest describing what the app is, and you create a service worker for offline functionality and push notifications from what we find in your website. And you also can create binary apps for older Android, iOS, and Windows Store. So you can create the binaries for the platforms that don't support Service Worker or don't support web manifests at all. This is the bigger part that we're writing there that is actually a kind of tricky thing to do, but it makes sense because we want these things to work for wherever and not say like you only need the newest Android with Chrome or you need an iOS device with a preview or you need to set developer settings and so on and so forth. The other thing we did in PWA Builder is we gave you an in-depth explanation and a validator generator for web manifest and service worker. So when you have a web manifest, you can also go there and it tells you what's wrong in it. Or the service worker, where the service worker is too aggressive in caching or not aggressive enough in caching. So I never liked these things, but the spec itself of service worker and web manifest can be daunting to look at, especially somebody who doesn't like JavaScript or doesn't want to understand the web. So building these kind of tools, I think, makes it much more easier for people to start embracing the idea of PWAs, the progressiveness of an application, and create the binary formats in the last one as well. Of course, this will not generate a newest, coolest iOS app that gives you the functionality of iOS 11 and works on the phone or your dog or whatever. But it gives you an application that is also available in these other platforms for free. And think about it, the PWA idea is that it's easy for you to maintain the thing. Google Lighthouse is an extension to Firefox. Google Lighthouse is an extension to Chrome and also a command line tool that allows you to lint PWAs. So you have a PWA here, the shop-polymerproject.org, for example, and it shows you if it's 100% according to the specifications that are listed at the beginning, what the performance of it is, how accessible it is, and what the best practices of PWAs have been followed. So this is an opinionated linting tool that allows you to tweak your application until it's getting better and better and then roll it out, and it's done in the browser itself without any extra overhead to download an SDK or download an IDE. It's basically running in the browser for you. Of course, these things are opinionated and Google has certain ideas of what a PWA for them is. All of them are very well meant, that they're all about concentrating on performance and making things easy for end users. But it's sometimes daunting for you to look at, so you don't need to have the 100% in all of them. I don't like things when they show me like a number, because then people play the game of like reaching the number rather than doing useful things for their end users. But it's a great way to find out how far off your web product is from becoming a good PWA already. What the web can do today is a resource that shows you all the cool things that computers and browsers can do. So you say like vibration, online state, battery status, Bluetooth, NFC, these kind of things. All the functionality in native we take for granted because it's a binary format. And the web were always a tricky thing. And you can see that in this case, it doesn't only show you all these things and links through to the specifications explaining how to use these kind of functionality, but it also checks the browser that you're using at this time and says if it supports it or doesn't support it. So that's a very good overview to go there from month to month and see like how far the web has come. There's a PWA directory that lists all the cool PWAs that you have, and it links through to their Lighthouse score and their web page test score. If you haven't seen web page test yet, it's pretty amazing. You can put a URL in there of your application and you can test it with servers around the world, seeing how long it takes to load your application, and you get a video timeline and screenshots how long it actually takes to render, and also the GPU and the memory consumption of your application in these devices. It's a very cool way to test how people outside of your fat connection in your office see what you've built. PWA Stats by Cloud4 is a great website that shows you case studies of PWAs. So it says, for example, Forbes PWA loads in 2.5 seconds on mobile compared to 6.5 seconds. For its previous site, impressions per visit up to 10%. So if you want to think about considering PWAs, and there's nothing that stops you from doing that, this is what to show your manager. This is what to show your bosses and your marketing people and say like, hey, Forbes has one, why don't we have one? Kind of thing. And this one, there's also a double Forbes, interesting. But these things are maintained by a community. It's not a marketing thing from those companies. We actually look at those and interview people and see what the real impact was. The big thing that PWAs do is open up a completely new market for us. If you think about emerging markets like Africa, India, Bangladesh, people do not have newest devices. People don't have internet connectivity the way we have. Everything is mobile connectivity. So if you can load something fast and store something on the device and have a very, very small footprint app that allows people to do the thing that they came for, you're the first to market in these environments. And there are millions and millions of users that are waiting to do something useful rather than wait for the app to load. PWAs are a great opportunity to clean up our act, to make the web faster and better, and to not jump onto native because we need to. The web has become much, much better. The distribution model is the link, and let's not forget that this is pretty amazing. You can go to a news item, an article, a blog post, a bot, an email, a message, a poster, an NFC beacon, a movie product placement, or a dog collar, and there you click on that link. You activate it in some way or another. And then it goes to, you follow that link, it goes to your app, the app HTML loads, the JavaScript executes, the service worker runs, and magic happens. And the more you come to the app, the more functionality you get. The second time you come to the app, it says like, hey, by the way, I work offline. Thanks. You didn't need to do anything for that. By trying me, by testing me, by loading me, you already installed me. And why do we force people through an installation process where we lose 90% of our users when they already came for using the thing? While they're using it, we can load things in the background, refresh, change caches, give them new functionality. It's a dynamic model for permissions as well. Instead of the app asking for every single permission on this planet up front, we can only ask on permissions, hey, you're uploading something right now. Do you want to access the camera? Yes, no. And then you set that in your settings in your local storage, and next time they don't get asked, they already got that access. A PWA is a try before you buy. You install the application by using it, and you grant it more permissions with more visits. And you may not grant it permissions as well. So we as app developers have to consider what people want to use the thing for rather than forcing them to do something. So allowing users to do what they came for and reach what they want to reach is a good idea. Let's not demand of users to change their device. When I see like this is only available on iOS, I'm never coming back to you. I'm sorry. I've got devices on all platforms, but I don't want to buy a $900 phone to buy things from your website. That makes no sense to me. Reach people where they are. Don't ask them to cater to you. We can simplify our products. We can slim them down, and we rethink the approach, and new users will enjoy your products. Make things easier. Don't give people these interfaces I showed you up front. These are not fun to use. These are like, if I had the choice between a root canal and using these things every day, a root canal would probably be the option that I take. The PWA approach fixes the worst problems of native apps and brings the best of the web to the app space. So if we compare again, we have all the positives of the web because it's web technology. And we have all the positives of native, except for the authenticated verified device access, but we're working on that, and the bleeding edge tech. But this is not meant to go on the web. The bleeding edge tech is the marketing of native. This is how companies compete with each other, so there's no way to standardize that. In the negatives, the verification authentication on the web is still hard, but at least with a secure endpoint, it's less hard than it is before. Patchy access to hardware might still be a thing, but it's a progressive app. It doesn't need to do the same functionality in every environment. It only needs to do what the certain device knows right now. Huge fragmentation of devices and displays is a given. It's not a negative anymore. Patchy trusting capabilities is getting better because it's now an app, it's not a website. Payments are not easy or expected, but payment APIs are in the making, and the next issue of Edge will have them as well, much like Chrome has them now. In native, most of the other things are not applicable any longer as well, because we do the same things that native apps did, but with a web way. To basically go there, try it out. You like it? Cool. You got new functionality now. Not like you want it, download it, install it, give me your firstborn and your credit card number and a pint of blood. Oh, you don't like it? Sorry. We don't go through these kind of jumping anymore. And that's basically it. If these are two PWAs on native. Twitter Lite and Twitter. I'm using Twitter Lite since it came out a half year now. The interaction model, there's not much difference. You saw that the PWA loaded much faster than the native one. But I can do all the things I do in one that I can do in the other. The main difference is that Twitter Lite uses about 90% less data traffic than the Twitter app does, because it doesn't load all the things in the background all the time, and it doesn't give me all the functionality that I really never needed. And it works on all my devices, even my older Androids, and even in a very, very flaky and very, very bad connection, rather than the native one telling me, sorry, you're not fast enough for that, here's a spinner for 5 minutes. And with that, I want you to show me what you got, and thanks very much.